Peace, family. MJ the Mastermind back again. Listen, you may not always control what happens to you, but you always control what it means. Hey, I'm gonna drop a couple quotes for y'all to start us off. You can't always find the good in everything, but you can always find the growth. Man, we reading from the book of wisdom today, man. We are back. Man, I promise you, man, if you are somebody that loves personal growth, personal development, manifestation, law of attraction, reality creation, all things in between, man, you're going to love this video and you're going to love my channel. All right. So let's jump right into it. All right. You may not always control what happens to you, but you always control what it means. One more time. You may not always control what happens to you, but you always control what it means. All right. So, man, like in the process of life, everybody has things that they go through. Some experiences are not so-called favorable. You know, we could look at them as, some experiences in life are just not positive, right? We lose people. Some things are painful. Some things cause hurt. Some things don't go the way that you expect them to. Right. And this is where that quote comes in. Like, you can't always find the good in everything, but you can always find the growth. And the reason why this is important to understand is that, especially in the manifestation and law of attraction community, a lot of weight is put on positive thinking. Right. And always having a positive mindset, especially when certain events may happen in our lives. But, to be real, we're human beings. Right? So some events that happen in our lives may just not be positive. And it could be extremely difficult to try to put this event that may have happened that is unfortunate and try to force it into this positive frame. All right? And your life is not shaped by what happens to you. Your life is shaped by what you decide it means. Okay? So when we have these certain events in our lives, yes, it can be really hard to put a positive spin on it, right? But one thing we always have access to, one choice that we always have is like, what does this event mean? What does this situation, obstacle, circumstance, what does it actually mean to me? Okay, and that's something that you will always have the power to decide, is what something means to you. Okay, nobody can ever take that away. Okay, now, meaning drives identity more than events. What does that mean? Meaning drives identity more than events. When a situation happens in your life, it's not the event itself that affects who you are at the core, right? Because two people can go through the same experience in life and have two completely different perspectives and outcomes, right? There's the famous story about the drunken father, right? And I forgot where I learned this or where I heard it. It goes something like this. It's like, two sons, both had a drunken father, alcoholic, abusive, the whole nine. And, one son, his life turned out terrible, right? And, terrible in the sense that, he couldn't really take care of himself. He ended up on drugs, alcohol, different things like that. And, when he was asked, man, like, how did this happen, or how did you end up this way? He said, my dad was an alcoholic. And then another version, the other son, right, he became this successful businessman. He never drank alcohol. He was sober, really, really successful and smart guy. And when they asked him, man, like, what made you so successful? He was like, man, my dad was an alcoholic, right? So it's the same situation, but two totally different perspectives. Right? So when we say meaning drives identity more than events, it's like the meaning that you give the event in your life is what's going to define your identity. Okay? Now, Carol Dweck talks about this a lot. She has a book called Mindset that's pretty popular. Man, she's one of the people that coined the term growth mindset. Very, very famous to this day. And another good stat on this is, hold on, before I move on, I'm moving too fast here. So people with a growth mindset are significantly more resilient and successful because they interpret failure as feedback rather than identity damage. Right? We can even take another example. Let's say the guy that, tries to talk to a girl and she shuts him down, and then now he thinks something is wrong with him. Right? That's his perspective. While as another guy may think it, all right, well, not a good fit, and move on to the next one. It's all perspective, right? So somebody could take something, an event, as feedback, and another person can take it as failure. Okay? So another good stat, studies on post-traumatic growth show around 30 to 70% of people report positive psychological change after major adversity. Man, I coined something that said I turned adversity into an asset, right? I turned adversity into an asset because I did, right? But it's the meaning that you give it, right? So it's not because the event was good. It was because they found meaning in it. There's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning, about a guy that was imprisoned. I think it's Viktor Van Frankl. I could be wrong, but I think it's Viktor Van Frankl. He has a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it's about his time, I believe, in a concentration camp. Yeah, Viktor Frankl. He was a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp, and that's a perfect example, right? This guy who was subject to slavery and sentenced to death, was able to find meaning and produce a body of work that stood the test of hundreds of years, right? Now, just to add on to this topic, one of my favorite quotes by the great Inky Johnson is, perspective drives performance. How you view what you do will always affect how you do what you do. Okay? So, performance psychology shows athletes who frame pressure as this is a threat have worse performances. People that frame it as this is a challenge have better performances. Same situation, different lens. Okay? Gotta change the glasses, y'all. Change the glasses, man. Change the perspective that you have on life, on what may be occurring in your life. And I know for somebody that may be going through adversity right now, as somebody who's been through adversity myself, it can be challenging, right? But the one piece of advice that I could provide is think about the person that you're going to become through that challenge, that opposition, or that adversity. Think about the person that comes out on the other side of that, right? And look forward to that. Be excited about that version of yourself, all right? Now, this is all connected to reality transurfing because we talk a lot about the coordination of meaning. Reality transurfing teaches the coordination of meaning. The meaning you deliberately assign to events in your life, right? Not fake positivity, but strategic interpretation. Okay? So, guys, we have to be aware. We have to be conscious and aware of this because the meaning that you give to these events, these circumstances in your life is going to be what manifests. Okay? So we have to really be aware of this. Okay? And this is the skill, as another example, right? even like my personal life, I remember when I got laid off 3 times in a row, right? Not too long after COVID. Picked up a couple of different contracts, got laid off. This was before I was a full-time entrepreneur, sales, and trader. Before that. So, and business owner, right? But before that, when I was working in corporate America as a systems engineer, I got laid off 3 times in a row. And the meaning that I gave that was, man, this is an opportunity for me to really chase my dreams. That was the meaning I gave it, right? And, I was able to leave my career at that point in time. And, do multiple 6 figures in business and millions in cash collected in sales. So it's really super, super important, right? I've seen it in my life as well. Okay. But one of my favorite, videos by the great Jocko Willink, he talks about the good mentality. I'm giving y'all a lot in this one video. I'm giving y'all a lot, man. Like, comment, subscribe, or don't. But I'm giving y'all some good stuff here. So another one of my, favorite digital mentors, or online mentors, I should say, is Jocko Willink, right? Former Navy SEAL. And he talks about the good mentality, right? And this is probably the most simplified version of this mindset. It talks about like when certain things happen in life, certain things that may not be looked at as favorable, his response is good, right? Okay, good. And finding and switching the perspective that goes with that good. Because like when you say good to something, it forces your mind in a certain direction, right? Because the next thought your mind is probably going to have is like, what's good about it? Because that's the direction that you force your mind in. Okay? Now, most people let the events in their life decide the meaning. Powerful people decide the meaning. Okay? So never let the event decide the meaning. You have power to choose, right? Like, you have the power to choose what the meaning is of this. Okay? And once you can master this, right? Like, certain things just become impossible. Like, depression becomes impossible. Like, I can never be depressed. I could be down I could be sad for a period of time, possibly. I could be upset, disgruntled, right? But I could never be depressed, me personally, right? It's just impossible. And it's because I have that mindset that it can never happen. Like, that's just a belief. So that lays the foundation. But like once you can master the meaning of things in your life, you protect yourself from a lot. Like you're more in control. Like, you seize back control of your life once you can actually determine what things mean. All right? So let's end it with the quotes of the day, man. You can't always find the good in everything, but you can always find the growth. Okay? And then, starting us from the top, you can't always find the good in everything, but you can always find the growth. Sorry, I just repeated it. But your life is not shaped by what happens to you. Your life is shaped by what you decide it means. Okay? Your life is not shaped by what happens to you. Your life is shaped by what you decide it means. All right? Man, love y'all. Gonna keep this heat coming, man. We're all on this journey to raise our consciousness, our frequency, our vibration, and become better versions of ourselves, man. So if you're in congruence with that, if you're aligned with that, like, comment, subscribe, or don't. It's all love. Peace and abundance, y'all.